Welcome back to the chilling story of Amina Richardson, the Dubai bride whose fairy tale love story spiraled into a nightmare. In Part 1, we uncovered how a glittering romance, luxury weddings, and promises of forever masked something far darker, a predator hiding in plain sight. Today, in Part 2, we dive even deeper. This is where the aftermath unfolds. The courtroom battles, the shocking testimonies, and the haunting reality of what truly happened behind those glamorous Dubai doors. If you thought the first chapter was disturbing, this continuation will shake you even more. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about love gone wrong, it's about betrayal, justice, and the lengths people will go to hide their darkest truths. Hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and let's step right back into the twisted saga of Amina Richardson. With his wife. On April 26, 2024, the grieving, betrayed wife named Amina Richardson ceased to exist. In her place emerged something else entirely, a woman with nothing left to lose, armed with a formidable arsenal of digital skills and a burning, singular desire for retribution. She booked a first-class ticket on Emirates Flight 211 from Dubai to Houston, departing that same evening. She told her family she was cutting the honeymoon short because she missed her husband too much to wait for his return. Her mother thought it was beautifully romantic. Her father worried about the exorbitant cost of changing international flights on such short notice. Neither could have possibly conceived that their daughter was traveling halfway around the world not for a reunion, but to execute a plan of murder. During the interminable 15-hour flight, Amina used the plane's satellite Wi-Fi to conduct the most comprehensive and chilling surveillance operation of her life. She hacked into the Four Seasons internal reservation system and confirmed that Khalid and Serenity were registered in the presidential suite under the aliases Mr. and Mrs. Smith. She accessed the city of Houston's public traffic camera feeds, pinpointing their arrivals and departures from the hotel. She even managed to infiltrate the hotel's own internal communication network, monitoring their room service orders, spa appointments, and housekeeping schedules. By the time her flight touched down at George Bush Intercontinental Airport on the evening of April 27th, Amina knew more about the intimate details of Khalid and Serenity's romantic getaway than they did themselves. She checked into a modest, forgettable business hotel across the street from the Four Seasons, paying in cash and using a set of flawless fake identification documents she had created years earlier for cybersecurity penetration testing. To any observer, she was just another anonymous business traveler, professional, unremarkable, invisible. But Amina was not there on business. She was there to deliver a verdict. The acquisition of the murder weapon was a transaction that highlighted the stark differences in gun laws between her home and the United States. In Texas, with her fake but impeccably crafted credentials, the process was disturbingly straightforward. She purchased a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver from a licensed dealer in downtown Houston, along with a box of ammunition and a small, discreet holster that fit perfectly under her blazer. The dealer, friendly and oblivious, complimented her on her choice. "Good for personal protection, ma'am," he said with a smile. "Light enough to carry, reliable enough to save your life." He had no idea how tragically prophetic his words would prove to be. For 36 agonizing hours, Amina watched and waited. She positioned herself in the Four Seasons lobby, disguised as a guest working diligently on her laptop, while in reality she was monitoring the hotel's own security feeds, which she had seamlessly hacked. She tracked their every movement. They had breakfast in the hotel restaurant every morning at 9 a.m. sharp. They spent their afternoons lounging at the rooftop pool, engaged in intimate conversations that made Amina's stomach churn with a toxic mix of jealousy and hatred. They had dinner reservations at a different high-end restaurant each night, always returning to their suite by 11 p.m. The most difficult part of the surveillance was not the technical challenge, It was the torture of watching the man she had loved for 6 years treat another woman with the same gentle touches, the same shared laughter, the same looks of adoration that she had believed were unique to their relationship. Every gesture, every kiss she witnessed was another twist of the knife in her heart, but it also served as fuel, feeding the cold, relentless engine of rage building inside her. On the afternoon of April 28th, their final day in Houston, Khalid and Serenity spent hours shopping for jewelry. Amina followed them at a distance to a Tiffany Company store, where she watched from the street through the window as Khalid examined a tray of engagement rings. The sales associate was visibly excited by the prospect of a major commission. Serenity tried on a stunning 3-carat solitaire diamond ring that cost more than a luxury sedan. When she looked at her reflection in the mirror, Amina could see the tears of joyful anticipation in her eyes. "It's perfect," Serenity whispered to Khalid, utterly unaware that his wife was standing just feet away, watching her entire world collapse. "But you know we can't, not yet," Khalid replied, the same empty promise he had been making for months. "Soon," he said, kissing her forehead. "I just need a little more time to figure out the divorce." They left the store without making a purchase, but for Amina, the message was clear and devastating. This was not a mere affair, it was a planned replacement. Khalid wasn't just cheating on her, he was actively preparing to usurp her entirely. The time for passive observation was over. The time for action had arrived. April 28th, 11:47 p.m. The Four Seasons Hotel, Houston. The 42nd floor. The presidential suite. Amina had gained access to the hotel's master key system 3 hours earlier, using a combination of social engineering and her cybersecurity prowess to convince the night manager that she was a federal agent conducting a counterterrorism operation. The fake FBI credentials she presented were so convincing that the manager not only granted her full access, but offered to quietly evacuate the entire floor. She assured him it wouldn't be necessary. Amina stood outside the heavy door of room 4201 for a full 5 minutes, listening to the sounds emanating from within. She could hear soft music playing, the faint clink of champagne glasses, and the low, intimate murmur of conversation, the sounds of a romantic evening that rightfully belonged to her. Her married couple. Her honeymoon. The key card slid into the electronic lock with a barely audible whisper. A small green light blinked once, and the locking mechanism clicked open. Amina took a deep, steadying breath, pulled the .38 revolver from its holster, and stepped inside. Khalid and Serenity were on the suite's private balcony, champagne flutes in hand, looking out over the glittering Houston skyline. They were discussing their future, a future that explicitly included Khalid's divorce, Serenity's rapid promotion within his father's company, and a wedding that would make their current deception seem like a minor footnote. "To new beginnings," Khalid was saying, raising his glass in a toast. "To finally being honest," Serenity replied, her voice filled with emotion as she touched her glass to his. It was at that precise moment that Amina stepped onto the balcony. "Let's talk about honesty," she said, her voice eerily calm and controlled, a stark contrast to the deadly weapon held steady in her hand. Both Khalid and Serenity spun around, their faces transforming from relaxed contentment to pure, unadulterated terror in a heartbeat. Khalid's champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble balcony floor. "Amina," he breathed, his face draining of all color. "What are you? How did you? Did you really think I was that stupid?" Amina asked. The gun unwavering, its barrel moving minutely to cover both of them. "Did you think I was too trusting, too naive, too blinded by love to ever figure out what you were doing?" Serenity, who had been frozen in shock, suddenly found her voice, though it trembled violently. "Listen, please, I know how this looks, but you don't understand the whole story. I understand perfectly. Amina's voice cut through the night air like a shard of ice. "You're the woman who has been sleeping with my husband. You're the woman who was trying on engagement rings this afternoon while I was planning our future. You're the woman who thought you could simply steal my life. Amina, please." Khalid took a half step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Let's just talk about this rationally. There's no need for any of this." "Need for what?" Amina's voice remained dangerously level. "Violence? Drama? The kind of scene that might embarrass you in front of your new girlfriend?" What followed was a 17-minute conversation that would later be retrieved from the hotel's security system audio logs and played in a hushed courtroom, providing a chilling, real-time record of a marriage's final, brutal dissolution. Khalid cycled through every manipulation tactic in his arsenal. He claimed the affair was meaningless, a trivial distraction. He insisted that Serenity had seduced him, that he was a victim of her advances. He promised, with desperate sincerity, to end the relationship immediately and devote himself fully to their marriage. Serenity, meanwhile, tried to reposition herself as an unwitting victim. She claimed she hadn't known about the wedding when the affair began. She said she had tried to break things off multiple times, but that Khalid had pursued her relentlessly. Both of them were lying, and Amina, armed with the complete truth, knew it. "You planned this," she stated, her voice growing stronger, colder with each uttered truth. "You planned to marry me for my family's money and connections, then divorce me and marry her. You were going to take half of everything my family built and use it to fund your new life with your mistress." "That's not," Khalid began to deny, but Amina cut him off, her composure finally beginning to crack. "I read your messages, Khalid. All of them. I know about the fake business trips, the secret phone, the shopping for her engagement ring today. I know you told her our wedding was just for show. I know you promised her it would all be over in 6 months. The weight of total exposure finally shattered Khalid's facade. His shoulders slumped in defeat, and for the first time in the entire confrontation, he told the unvarnished, unmanipulated truth. "I do love her," he said quietly, the words hanging in the humid night air. "I'm sorry, Amina. But I do." Those 5 words, "I do love her," were the last words Khalid Washington would ever speak. The first bullet struck Serenity in the center of her chest as she tried to turn and run back into the safety of the hotel suite. She fell immediately, her hands stretching out toward the balcony door as if she could still escape the horrifying reality she had helped create. The second bullet hit Khalid squarely in the forehead as he lunged toward Amina, whether to attack her, to disarm her, or to plead one last time, would never be known. Both shots were instantly, unequivocally fatal. Both victims were dead before the echoes of the gunshots finished rolling across the Houston skyline. Amina stood on the balcony for 3 full minutes, the smoking revolver still held in her hand, her gaze fixed on the bodies of the 2 people who had systematically dismantled her life, her identity, and her future. Then, with a stillness that was more terrifying than any outburst of emotion, she walked back into the lavish suite, placed the gun carefully on the glass coffee table, sat down in a velvet armchair, and dialed 911. "I'd like to report a double homicide," she said when the dispatcher answered, her voice unnervingly calm and clear. "I'm the shooter. I'm not armed anymore. I'm not resisting arrest. Please send someone to collect the bodies." When Houston Police Department officers arrived 8 minutes later, they found her exactly as described, seated calmly, her hands visible on the armrests, the weapon placed neatly away from her reach. She was staring straight ahead with a blank, hollow expression that experienced officers recognized as profound psychological shock. She offered no resistance as they handcuffed her. She did not ask for a lawyer. She did not claim self-defense, temporary insanity, or any of the other legal strategies her family's expensive attorneys would later attempt to employ. Instead, she offered a single, haunting statement that would summarize the entire tragedy for everyone who heard it. "They had a week of happiness together. That's more than they gave me." The aftermath of the murders created an international diplomatic and media firestorm that stretched from the Houston courthouse to the highest levels of government in both the United States and the United Arab Emirates. Amina's father, Rashid Richardson, arrived in Houston within 18 hours, accompanied by a veritable army of high-powered attorneys, including former federal prosecutors and experts in international law. Her mother, Layla, was hospitalized in Dubai, suffering from what doctors described as a complete nervous breakdown. The Richardson family's initial strategy was one of aggressive damage control. They hired the most expensive crisis management firm available, launched a sophisticated social media campaign portraying Amina as a victim of profound emotional abuse and gaslighting, and began making discreet inquiries about the possibility of transferring the case to Dubai, where their considerable influence might secure a more favorable outcome. However, the evidence against Amina was overwhelming, and the Harris County District Attorney's Office, led by the formidable Amanda Foster, had no intention of allowing wealth and international pressure to interfere with the pursuit of justice. The investigation conducted by the Houston Police Department, under the meticulous direction of Detective Maria Santos, painted a picture of cold, calculated, premeditated murder that was impossible to refute. Amina's internet search history revealed weeks of methodical planning. Her travel records proved she had deliberately lied about her reasons for coming to Houston. The gun purchase, the fake identification, the hotel surveillance, every piece of evidence pointed toward a carefully orchestrated execution, not a crime of passion. "This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence," Detective Santos stated firmly during a press conference. "This was a military-style operation carried out by someone who used her professional expertise to hunt down and murder two people." The international media coverage was relentless and pervasive. Major networks from CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera to countless others descended upon Houston, turning the case into a global spectacle. Dubbed the Honeyman Murder Case, the story contained all the elements guaranteed to captivate a worldwide audience: immense wealth, stunning beauty, shocking betrayal, international intrigue, and an act of violence that was both brutal and intimately personal. Social media platforms exploded with commentary, much of it shockingly sympathetic to Amina. Hashtags like #JusticeForAmina began trending globally, with thousands of users arguing that Khalid and Serenity had received their just desserts for their cruel deception. Others vehemently condemned her actions as vigilantism and called for the fullest extent of the law to be applied. The case became a Rorschach test for societal attitudes toward infidelity, marriage, women's rights, and the limits of justified anger across different cultures and legal systems. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a forensic psychologist retained by the prosecution, spent 47 hours interviewing Amina in the Harris County Jail. Her findings presented a complex psychological portrait that defied easy categorization. Amina Richardson does not fit the typical profile of a double murderer, Dr. Mitchell explained during her testimony. She is highly intelligent, emotionally controlled, and displayed no classic signs of psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder. What we observed was something far more nuanced and perhaps more dangerous: the complete psychological disintegration of an individual whose entire sense of self was constructed around a relationship that was revealed to be a monstrous lie. According to Dr. Mitchell's analysis, Amina had suffered from what psychologists term emotional dependency disorder since childhood. Her parents' frequent absences had created a deep-seated, pathological fear of abandonment, which she had managed by becoming the perfect daughter, the perfect student, and ultimately, the perfect girlfriend. She didn't just love Khalid, Dr. Mitchell continued. She had constructed her entire identity around being the woman he loved. When she discovered that foundation was false, it wasn't merely heartbreak. It was a complete ego death. In her mind, if she wasn't Khaled's beloved wife, then she wasn't anyone at all. The evaluation revealed other disturbing details. Amina had been digitally monitoring Khaled's activities for years, not initially out of jealousy, but out of a compulsive need to maintain control over the relationship that defined her existence. She had memorized his daily routines, analyzed his speech patterns for micro-expressions of deception, and created elaborate mental models of his behavior that allowed her to predict and influence his actions. She essentially turned love into a data-driven science project, Dr. Mitchell observed. And when the empirical data finally proved her core hypothesis wrong, she couldn't accept the results. Her response was to eliminate the variables that were corrupting her experiment. The defense team, led by the renowned criminal attorney Jonathan Hayes, attempted to use this psychological evaluation to build a case for temporary insanity. They argued that Amina had suffered a complete psychotic break triggered by the devastating discovery of her husband's betrayal. However, the prosecution had its own expert witness, Dr. Robert Kim, who presented a starkly contrasting interpretation. The defendant's actions demonstrate a clear, consistent pattern of premeditation and rational planning, Dr. Kim testified. She purchased weapons, created false identification, conducted sophisticated digital surveillance, and executed a plan that required dozens of conscious, calculated decisions. This is not the behavior of someone experiencing a break from reality. This is the behavior of someone who coldly decided that murder was an acceptable and logical solution to her personal problems. The technological aspects of the case became a focal point, fascinating both the legal teams and the public. Amina's cybersecurity expertise had made her a nearly perfect predator, capable of monitoring her victims' every move without leaving a traditional physical trace. FBI cybercrime specialist agent Lisa Crawford led the digital forensics investigation, and her findings were staggering in their scope and detail. We found evidence that Amina had been conducting extensive digital surveillance on Khaled for over 2 years. Agent Crawford explained. She had installed keylogging software on his computers, cloned his phone data, and created a network of fake social media accounts to monitor his activities. She knew about the affair months before she chose to take action. The digital evidence demonstrated that Amina had been tracking Serenity even longer than she had admitted. She had hacked into Serenity's email, her social media profiles, and even her dating app history from before she moved to Dubai. She had compiled detailed psychological profiles of both victims, analyzing their communication patterns and predicting their behavior with frightening accuracy. She knew their schedules better than they did themselves. Agent Crawford stated. She knew where they would be, when they would be there, and how to access their locations without detection. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a precision strike carried out by an individual with the technical skill to make it nearly flawless. The prosecution argued that this level of detailed planning was incontrovertible proof of premeditation. The defense countered that it demonstrated obsessive behavior entirely consistent with severe mental illness. Both sides, however, agreed on one unsettling point. Amina Richardson was one of the most dangerous criminals they had ever encountered, precisely because she did not fit any conventional criminal profile. While the legal battle raged, the families of Khaled Washington and Serenity Brooks were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Khaled's mother, Zendaya Washington, became the public face of the prosecution's victim impact campaign. She spoke at press conferences, gave emotionally wrenching television interviews, and eventually founded a support group for families of murder victims. "My son wasn't perfect," she said during one particularly moving interview, her voice thick with grief. "He made terrible mistakes. He hurt people deeply, and he destroyed his marriage with his choices. But having an affair is not a capital crime. Nothing he did deserved what happened to him. Zendaya's grief was uniquely complicated by her own feelings about her son's actions. She had loved Amina like a daughter for 6 years. She had helped plan the wedding, had danced with Khalid at the reception, and had dreamed of future grandchildren. Learning the full extent of his deception had devastated her almost as much as his murder. "I keep asking myself what I could have done differently," she admitted during her victim impact statement in court. "If I had raised him to be a more faithful man, if I had warned Amina about his tendencies, if I had just been a better mother somehow." Serenity's family chose a different path. Her parents, Marcus and Denise Brooks, largely avoided the media circus, choosing to grieve their daughter's loss in private while honoring her memory through the establishment of scholarship funds and mentorship programs for young Black women pursuing careers in business. But her sister, Melody Brooks, became an unexpected voice of painful nuance in the case. "My sister made a terrible, unforgivable choice," Melody said during her powerful testimony. "She chose to have an affair with a married man, and that choice caused immense pain to an innocent woman. But she did not deserve to die for it. No one deserves to be executed for making a mistake in love." Melody's statement highlighted one of the most difficult aspects of the entire tragedy: the fact that while Khalid and Serenity were unequivocally the victims of a brutal murder, they were also the perpetrators of a devastating betrayal that had directly triggered their own deaths. The case exposed deep and often unbridgeable cultural divisions regarding marriage, infidelity, and women's rights that extended far beyond the courtroom. In more traditional communities within the Middle East, many viewed Amina's actions as understandable, if not strictly justifiable. Concepts of honor, while legally condemned, still carried significant cultural weight in some circles, and there was a segment of the population that saw Khalid's betrayal as a violation of sacred vows that warranted extreme retribution. Dr. Amira Hassan, a cultural anthropologist at Rice University, provided expert testimony on this complex dynamic. In many traditional cultures, a woman's honor and social standing are inextricably tied to her husband's fidelity. Dr. Hassan explained. When that fidelity is violated, particularly in such a public and humiliating manner, the woman isn't just emotionally wounded, she is socially annihilated. Her options become severely limited: publicly accept the humiliation and loss of status, or take action to restore her honor. This cultural perspective clashed dramatically with contemporary American legal and social norms, creating a schism that played out in courtrooms, on social media, and in living rooms across both nations. The prosecution argued vehemently that cultural background could not excuse premeditated murder under Texas law. The defense contended that the cultural dimension of her trauma was a critical mitigating factor that the court was obligated to consider during sentencing. In many ways, the two sides were fighting for more than just Amina's fate. They were advocating for competing visions of justice, honor, and a woman's right to respond to catastrophic betrayal. The trial of the state of Texas versus Amina Richardson began on October 14, 2024, in the 174th District Court of Harris County. Presiding was Judge Patricia Williams, a 30-year veteran of the bench who had overseen dozens of murder trials, but nothing had prepared her for the media circus and international scrutiny this case would attract. The courthouse was perpetually surrounded by protesters representing every conceivable viewpoint. "Justice for Amina." Supporters held signs reading, "Betrayal kills too," and "Honor over murder." Counter-protesters carried banners declaring, "Murder is never justified," and "Two lives matter." International news agencies set up a small city of satellite trucks across the street, broadcasting live updates to a captivated global audience. The case had transcended its status as a criminal proceeding to become a worldwide referendum on marriage, fidelity, and the limits of justifiable anger. Prosecutor Amanda Foster, known for her relentless approach to high-profile cases, understood this would define her career. Her opening statement was direct and uncompromising. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice echoing in the packed courtroom, "this case is about one thing and one thing only: murder. Not honor, not betrayal, not cultural differences. Murder. The defendant planned, tracked, and executed two human beings because her feelings were hurt. That is not justice. That is terrorism." Foster's strategy was to focus with laser precision on the premeditation. She presented the jury with a minute-by-minute timeline that showed months of digital stalking, weeks of logistical planning, and a methodical execution that demonstrated clear, cold intent to kill. The prosecution's star witness was FBI agent Lisa Crawford, who spent 2 full days walking the jury through the mountain of digital evidence, over 400 exhibits including emails, text messages, location data, search histories, and financial records that formed an undeniable narrative of planned homicide. "The defendant didn't kill in a moment of passion," Agent Crawford stated definitively. "She killed after careful consideration, detailed planning, and multiple conscious opportunities to choose a different path." The defense team, led by Jonathan Hayes, faced a nearly insurmountable challenge. The evidence was overwhelming, the victims were sympathetic despite their affair, and public opinion, while divided, was largely unsympathetic to vigilante justice. Hayes's opening statement took a radically different approach. "This isn't a story about murder," he told the jury, his tone more that of a storyteller than a litigator. "This is a story about the systematic psychological destruction of a human being, followed by the inevitable explosion that occurs when someone is pushed beyond the outermost limits of human endurance. Amina Richardson didn't plan to kill anyone. She planned to confront the people who had stolen her life, and when that confrontation spiraled out of control, tragedy occurred." The defense's strategy relied heavily on the psychological testimony and cultural expert analysis. They argued that Amina had been the victim of years of psychological abuse disguised as love, that her cultural background made the betrayal exponentially more traumatic, and that the murders were the result of a catastrophic psychological breakdown, not calculated revenge. The testimony of Dr. Sarah Mitchell became the cornerstone of the defense's case. For 6 hours over 2 days, she guided the jury through Amina's psychological profile, explaining how childhood abandonment issues had created a personality pathologically dependent on external validation. When Amina discovered that her marriage was a lie, Dr. Mitchell explained, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was the complete and total collapse of her reality. Everything she had believed about herself, her worth, her future, all of it was revealed to be false. In psychological terms, she experienced what we call ego death, a complete dissolution of self that can trigger extreme, primal defensive reactions. But the prosecution's rebuttal, delivered by Dr. Robert Kim, was devastating. Psychological trauma, no matter how severe, does not excuse methodical, planned murder. Dr. Kim stated flatly. The defendant had dozens of off-ramps. She could have filed for divorce. She could have confronted her husband privately. She could have sought therapy. She could have walked away. Instead, she chose to hunt down 2 people and execute them. That's not mental illness. That's evil. After 18 hours of deliberation spread over 3 tense days, the jury returned with their verdict on November 3, 2024. The courtroom fell into a breathless silence as the foreperson stood. On the count of murder in the first degree in the death of Khalid Washington, we the jury find the defendant, Amina Richardson, guilty. On the count of murder in the first degree in the death of Serenity Asher Brooks, we the jury find the defendant, Amina Richardson, guilty. The room erupted. Amina's supporters screamed their outrage. The victims' families wept with a painful mix of relief and renewed grief. International media scrambled to broadcast the verdict live. Amina herself showed no visible emotion. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze fixed on some distant point, her expression the same unnerving blank mask it had been since her arrest. The sentencing phase began immediately. Both sides presented additional evidence regarding Amina's character and the lasting impact of her crimes. Ultimately, Judge Williams sentenced Amina to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for each murder, the sentences to be served concurrently. It was the harshest sentence possible under Texas law short of the death penalty, ensuring she would spend the rest of her natural life behind bars. The defendant's actions represent a complete and utter rejection of the methods civilized society uses to resolve disputes, Judge Williams said from the bench, her voice firm. While this court acknowledges the profound emotional trauma caused by marital infidelity, nothing justifies the premeditated murder of two human beings. The sentence of this court reflects the value we place on human life and the absolute primacy of the rule of law. In the 3 years since the murders that shocked the world, the ripple effects of the case continue to reverberate. Amina Richardson is incarcerated at the Mountain View Unit, a maximum security women's prison in Gatesville, Texas. According to prison officials, she has been a model inmate, spending most of her time in the prison library and offering legal research assistance to other prisoners. She has granted several interviews to journalists, but has never expressed remorse for her actions. "I did what I had to do," she told a reporter from The Guardian in 2025. "They destroyed my life, and I destroyed theirs. That seems fair to me." Her appeals have been unsuccessful, and her family has largely severed ties. The Richardson hotel empire collapsed under the weight of the negative publicity, and her parents have reportedly relocated to Switzerland. Khalid Washington's mother, Zendaya, moved back to Houston and dedicated herself to the center she founded for families of murder victims. She speaks regularly on themes of forgiveness and the critical choice between healing and revenge. "I don't hate Amina," she said in a recent interview. "Hate is the very toxin that caused all this tragedy. I choose to honor my son's memory by helping other families find a path to peace." Serenity Brooks's family has channeled their grief into the scholarship fund established in her name, which has already helped over 200 young African American women pursue careers in international business. Her sister, Melody, authored a book about the case titled When Love Becomes Murder, which became a bestseller and was later adapted into a documentary series. The case also precipitated significant changes in cross-border law enforcement cooperation between the U.S. and the UAE, particularly concerning the tracking of international suspects and the prevention of honor-based violence. It forced societies in both nations to confront uncomfortable questions about marriage, cultural expectations, and the terrifying potential of modern technology to be weaponized for personal revenge. The Amina Richardson case represents an entirely new category of crime, explained Dr. Janet Morrison, a criminologist at Stanford University. She utilized professional-level cyber surveillance techniques to conduct what amounted to a private military operation against civilian targets. This is the face of domestic terrorism in the digital age. Law enforcement agencies worldwide now use the case as a training tool for recognizing and preventing technology-enabled stalking and violence. As we reach the conclusion of this devastating narrative, we are left with questions that far exceed the specifics of one woman's violent revenge. The case of Amina Richardson forces us to confront the darkest potentials of human nature while simultaneously questioning our own capacity for empathy, understanding, and forgiveness. Was Amina a cold-blooded killer who deserved her fate, or was she a victim of systematic emotional abuse who finally broke under pressure that would have destroyed almost anyone? The uncomfortable truth, as it so often is in real life, likely resides in the terrible space between these two extremes. Amina was both a victim and a perpetrator, a wounded woman seeking a twisted form of justice and a calculated killer who chose annihilation over healing. Her story serves as a permanent warning about the dangers of constructing one's entire identity around another person, about the toxic potential of unchecked jealousy and possessiveness, and about the terrifying ease with which modern technology can amplify our most destructive impulses into deadly action. But it also forces upon us critical questions about how society responds to infidelity, betrayal, and the utter collapse of the relationships upon which people build their lives. How do we support those whose worlds have been shattered by deception? How do we, as a community, prevent heartbreak from festering into homicidal rage? The families of Khalid Washington and Serenity Brooks will spend the rest of their lives grieving for two people who made terrible choices but did not deserve to die for them. Amina Richardson will live out her days in a prison cell, a woman of immense intelligence and capability whose gifts were ultimately twisted toward destruction. And all of us are left to wonder, with a sense of profound unease, what we would do if confronted with a betrayal of similar magnitude. How far would we go to restore our sense of justice and honor? The answers to these questions reveal uncomfortable truths about the human heart and the perilously thin line between love and hatred, between justice and revenge, and between sanity and a madness that wears the face of reason. This story leaves us questioning everything we thought we knew about love, loyalty, and the breaking point of the human spirit. What would you do if faced with such a betrayal? Could you walk away, or would you seek justice in your own way? Share your thoughts below. What's your name, and where are you watching from? Shatiel Jenkins, we know you're out there. Tell us what you think of Amina's story. If this case has gripped you as much as it has us, hit that like button, subscribe, and join the killer next door for more heart-pounding narratives. Our next case dives into family secrets and hidden loyalties. Stay tuned. Stay safe, reflect on your relationships, and never underestimate the power of a broken heart.